Hi everyone, Crista Cowan here with another episode of The Barefoot Genealogist. Today we are talking about those leaf hints on your online tree at Ancestry. Specifically, we're going to cover how they're generated, what you can do with them, and then some of my favorite tips for getting through them most effectively and making sure you're using them accurately. With that introduction, let's go ahead and dive in. Let's first talk about what we're talking about when we say shaky leaf hints. When you have your tree on Ancestry, we introduced this little leaf years ago, and it used to actually shake at you every time you came to your tree view. Then y'all told us to stop that, so we did. So then it just wiggled a little bit at you when you first loaded your tree. Now, with the new redesign of Ancestry in the last year, it just sits there, but it's still super valuable. And so I want to make sure that you understand how we generate those so that you can get the most out of them. Now, Ancestry has more than 17 billion historical records, and we're adding an average of about 2 million new records every day. That's a lot of records to search through. Now, you put information that you know about your family history into a tree or a pedigree chart here on Ancestry. And what that allows you to do is it allows you to take advantage of some of the powerful tools that Ancestry has to do some of the searching for you. So we take whatever information you've entered into your tree, however much or little that may be, and we compare it to a subset of those 17 billion records. Now keep in mind that I said it's a subset. Those 17 billion records are contained in about 32,000 different databases. And so we have designated the top 10% of the most popular databases as our hint databases. Now that top 10% of our most popular databases accounts for well over 2/3, maybe even close to 3/4 of our total record count, but it is not all of the records available on Ancestry. So we're taking what you enter in your tree, we're comparing it to this subset of databases that are designated as hint databases. And if we can find a record that contains some of the same information, and by we, I mean a computer, is taking this information, comparing it to this information, and if it thinks enough information matches, it will show you that as a hint, okay? So that's how those hints are generated. Now, keep in mind, like I said, not all databases hint. So once you've gone through these leaf hints, there's going to be some more research to do. We'll talk about that more next week. One of the pieces of advice that I would give you is to review your hints from the tree page or the person page in order to get complete context. Now, here's what I mean by that. Up here in the top corner on Ancestry, you have the little leaf symbol, and if you click on that, it allows you to go to a complete list of all the hints that you have in a particular tree. Now you'll notice here I have 97,000 hints. Clearly I have no obsession or unmet desire that requires me to go through every single one of these particular hints. I do have the option here of sorting my hints by record, by photos, by stories, by member trees. I can filter it by the most recent hints or sort it by last name, filter it by name, lots of different things I can do to go through these hints from what we call this all hints page. However, I'm not going to do that. I find that going through hints on the all hints page means I make more mistakes because they're out of context. There's no way to look at a record when I'm working on a particular family and then all of a sudden be looking at a record for somebody else without introducing opportunities for some of those errors or some of those mistakes. So I prefer to view my hints from what we call the tree view. This is the pedigree version of the tree view. I can also switch it to the family version of the tree view, and some of you may prefer one over the other. And I can view hints from here. You'll see the little leaf shows up. Doesn't matter whether I'm in pedigree view or family view, but when I'm looking at the tree view, that's going to be more effective. I can also view hints from the person profile. So here's how I got there. If you click on any person in your tree and you go to their profile page, you will have a hints tab. And that hints tab then allows me to click to view the particular hints for that person. That is how I prefer to do it, because when I'm researching a family, reviewing hints means I am conscious of what's going on with that family. I've been spending some time with them and with their records. I know who the husband and wife are. I'm working with some of the children, or I'm trying to discover the children or the parents. That context becomes important when you're reviewing some of these records. Now, that's just my advice. You can do it however you want, but that's how I would encourage you to do it. The other thing to keep in mind is that these are hints. They are not facts. That means that the computer is just showing you records that match some of the information you might have in your tree. It means not all of the hints are going to necessarily be pertinent or be factual for your person. There are errors in your tree, there are errors in records, and so the computer's doing the best it can to show you things that it thinks are going to be beneficial. You still have to review each of those hints to determine, is this really my person, is this not my person? If this record is for my person, which information on this record is accurate or inaccurate? So here's one of the ways that I do that. I actually will review all the records that I have before I attach them, because that makes sure that I'm not attaching records that aren't really for my person. One of the reasons you don't want to do that is because if you attach a record, that tells the computer system, hey, this is a good record. And then the computer system goes out and says, well, there's other people who've attached this same record. Here's some other hints to records that they've also attached. Those are called secondary hints. And you're going to generate those secondary hints every time you attach a record. So you want to make sure that that record really is for your person before you attach it. Here's how I've found is one of the best ways to do that. Let's use Marianne Dunlap here as an example. She has a few hints here. I can come in and I can review those particular hints. Now you'll notice the very top hint that you're almost always going to get is going to be other member trees. I love other member trees. They're super valuable. People have uploaded photos and documents. There are clues in those trees, sometimes to parents that I didn't know about, or children or grandchildren that I didn't know about. So I use trees. However, I always want to look at record hints first. And one of the reasons I do that is because I want to make sure that I'm looking at these records with fresh eyes, that I'm not jaded or that my perception isn't altered by someone else's opinion about what these records really mean or say. Again, you can do that however you want, but that's how I have chosen to do that. Now, here I can go through this hint list. Here's an 1880 census record. This looks like a marriage, index to a marriage record for her second marriage. This is a Confederate pension record, but it looks like it might be for a different family member with just some matching information. So for now, I'm just going to ignore that. And by ignore, I mean just skip over, not actually click ignore, because I may want to come back to that later. Here is a find a grave entry. And then we've got some photos that I may want to review later. And that's kind of how I go through that process. Now, one of the things you may have noticed is that I didn't actually go review each record one at a time. This is what I mean when I say you want to review all the records together, because it's going to make sure that you're more accurate. So one of the things that I do is I right-click on any link, and you can do this anywhere on the internet. Right-click on any link and open it in a new tab. You can do that with a PC or with a Mac. And what it does is it opens up new tabs in your browser here across the top. You can then click on these tabs and drag them around so that they're in chronological order. Now, I'm then going to want to open up any of the images that are also attached. This 1880 census, for example, right-click, open a new tab. Now I've got the image of the census in one tab, and I've got the actual index or the transcription of that record in another tab. I can toggle back and forth to compare those two things. This is a marriage index, so you'll notice there is no image available, and then I could do the same thing, open up this find a grave entry to review it. So this allows me to just toggle back and forth really quickly between each of these records to determine, are all of these records about the same person? Are each of these records giving me the same information that I need in order to determine, is this the right person or not? If I can't tell, if there's not enough information either in the record or that I already know in my tree, Ancestry has now provided you with a maybe button. You can click that, and what it does is it bookmarks that record essentially to the person's hint tab. So it'll show up here under the undecided tab on your hints so that you can go back and review it later when you have more information. If this is not for my person, and I'm pretty certain of that, I can click no. Now, more information may come to light later that it really was my person, or that it wasn't my person, but it was somebody else in the family, and I may want to retrieve that record. Those are always going to show up here under the ignored tab, so you can get back to those records. If it is your person, you've gone through and you've made sure that all the information is accurate, and as a bonus step, one of the things I do, I actually go through and transcribe all the records. So I open up the notes panel here, and I start entering the information from the record into my notes. And I do that for a couple of reasons. One is so that I can extract all the juicy goodness from the record, make sure I'm not missing any piece of information that's about their life or any piece of information that's going to give me clues or evidence to find the next piece of information that I'm looking for. So I extract all of that information. It also gives me a really neat timeline of their life, of what's going on, and helps me make sure I've got the right person. So I transcribe the record, then I attach it. And to attach a record, you just click yes when you're reviewing it from hints. You're going to get this list here. The information on the left-hand side is what was transcribed from the record, and the information on the right-hand side is what's in your tree. And you'll notice for each fact or each piece of information on the record, it's going to create a source citation for that piece of information. I'll show you what that looks like here in just a minute. If there's information on the record that is not in your tree, it's going to add it to your tree, and you'll see the little new tag there so you know what's being added and what's not. Now, in some cases, specifically the 1880 census and later, the relationships to the head of household are listed on the record. What that means is that Ancestry knows who these people on this record are in relationship to the person that you're looking at. And if we can match up those people in that record with the people in your tree, we'll allow you to actually attach that record to multiple people at once. Now, if the computer can't match up a person in the record to a person in your tree, it will create a new person. If the person is already in your tree, you want to make sure that you don't create a duplicate person. And one of the things it'll allow you to do is select a person from the family in order to make that particular match. So be careful about creating duplicates when you are adding information to your tree. Go ahead then and click Save to your tree, and that will take this record, this particular 1880 census that I just found, and it will attach it to Mary Ann, and it will save it to her husband. And now in the facts view, you'll see that 1880 census, and you can see exactly which facts in the timeline are sourced by that particular source citation. So that's your options. The final thing I just want to remind you of as you're processing these leaf hints or working through these leaf hints is that after you've attached a record, make sure that it actually attached to all the people on the record. We just walked through an 1880 census example, and that was fairly simple because it was just a husband and wife, and so it attached to both of them. But sometimes you'll have a whole list of family members. You'll have a head of household and his wife and 3 children and 2 stepchildren and his mother-in-law, and sometimes it doesn't attach to everyone in the family. So you'll want to go back and make sure that it attached to everyone in the family. If it missed anybody, here's an 1860 census, for example, where we have no idea what the relationships are. I can then just go through and click on each person in this record and save it to them individually. Well, that is all I have prepared for you today, but next week we're going to talk about what to do next. So today we talked about how those shaky leaf hints are generated, how you can work through them best to make sure that you're climbing your family tree and not someone else's. Next week, we're going to talk about the next steps, because remember, not all records on Ancestry are part of this hint process. Until next time, this is Crista Cowan. Have fun climbing your family tree.